From CBS 47 and Fox 30, it's time for This Week in the 904.
Welcome to This Week in the 904. I'm your host, Emily Turner. This is a community affairs show, and it focuses on politics, public policy, and the issues that affect our local communities. Joining us today is Councilmember at Large, Ron Salem. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Emily.
Yeah, second time's a charm. Back again. A lot to talk about because there's a lot that's happening in Jacksonville, and one of the more recent ones that happened this week is this land swap that is two parcels on the river, one in La Villa. Kind of walk folks through what this land swap is, and then we'll get into your thoughts on it.
It is, there's the neighborhoods committee was presented with the plan for the UF campus. The city owns all the property, but this one piece called the interline piece. And when this presentation was made, I asked the question, well, who owns the interline piece? And there was a lot of stammering and such, and finally it came out that Gateway owned it, which raised some concerns to me, and we have since found out that released the next day was this swap for two pieces on the river, the landing site and the piece across the across the bridge from that. There's some, they paid $4 million for it. They claim it's worth $8 million now, and it may be. They may have gotten a great deal on this piece of property, and that's how they're justifying this land swap for those two prime pieces of riverfront property.
Because they're valued, I mean, even if it's still 8, the valuation of the two pieces of riverfront prime real estate are not 8. It's more than 8. It's like 10 something, right?
That's correct. And it is my feeling, and I introduced legislation on Wednesday, which basically says, I want to buy the property from Gateway. And the city does. I'm introducing this legislation so we can buy that property, get it to the University of Florida, and then if they want to develop the riverfront, let them go through a process and apply like any other developer would. That piece is too important to us to be going through this, in my opinion, this legislation, land swaps and all those things. The DIA voted on Wednesday afternoon 5-2 to continue with the land swap proposal with the option of coming to the council and letting us buy the property.
So if now that they've voted, kind of what's the process? Because it's so interesting with DIA. They don't have ultimate authority, right? This still has to be approved by council?
That is correct. Anything they do, the DIA was created by the city council. So anything they do comes to the city council. I think the ball is in the court of Gateway Jacks and what they want to do. Do they just want to be, this is too important to the city, let's go ahead and sell it to the city, and 6-week process, by the end of March we would buy the property? Or do they want to continue this land swap, which gets into May and June, which concerns me from a timing standpoint, because they're going to have students in that building in August. So
UF is going to have students in that building?
That's correct.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that close of a time frame. Like, it's right around the corner.
They've accelerated their time frame. So I am just concerned that we're going to be in a rush if this land swap continues, and the council is going to be in a very difficult position of, hey, if you don't approve this deal, UF campus is not going to occur. I'd rather buy it and be done with it.
Well, do you think that is intentionally backing council into a corner?
Well, we'll see. I have a concern that that's what's going to happen for sure.
Do you think that the land swap would pass as it is right now?
That's a great question, and I don't know. I know many of us have concerns about just how it happened and the players and the fundraising that occurred and all those things, the value, the appraisals of the property. There are a lot of questions about it, and a lot of that came out at the DIA meeting. There were 2 votes against it. I thought there may be 3 or 4 against it, but they raised the same issues that I have raised.
And the issues, I mean, can you talk more in depth about what those concerns are, like the process and the funding?
The speed of this whole land swap proposal, are the appraisals and the different prices on the pieces of property, I think some members of the DIA board would rather go through a much slower process. Too important for us to rush this thing.
Has Gateway Jacks revealed their plans for those parcels?
Essentially, basic plans, yes, and they did at the DIA meeting on Wednesday.
So then the next step from here is what? This goes to council?
After there's a 30-day period where other people could make proposals for the interline piece of property, and then it would eventually come to the council.
Where do you think the speed comes from? Because we've been, like, for example, other DIA projects, the Laura Street Trio, for example. I mean, this is like the never-ending project, and then this happens, and it happens so quickly. To what do you attribute the speed? Is it a good thing, or is it maybe a bad thing?
Well, I think the speed is because UF needs that building to start classes in August, which is why I would rather just purchase it. The mayor has indicated, and Mike Weinstein, they don't want to spend any more city money, which is almost laughable to me, based on her past budgets and such. My proposal is to use reserves to buy it initially, and then replace those dollars with the JEA $40 million we are receiving in October. So I don't want to use the reserves without replenishing the reserves.
And so who spoke on behalf of this? Obviously Gateway Jacks. I wasn't at this meeting, but Gateway Jacks spoke. Did the administration speak?
Mike Weinstein spoke as well, and Cindy Trimmer, their lobbyist, was there as well.
What was their reasoning behind making this deal happen? As opposed to, I mean, obviously no, they don't want to spend any money, but why Gateway Jacks?
I think because they own the property, and it was a way of getting that property, getting their interline property, which we desperately need for UF, into our hands, and moving 2 pieces of riverfront property into development.
Interesting. Downtown is such a big topic, and there's much more to talk about that, which we'll get to just after the break. So in the meantime, make sure you stick around. We've got more to talk about downtown. We're going to talk about trash, which we did last week, so we'll get very excited about that. We'll be right back after this.
From CBS 47 and Fox 30, you're watching This Week in the 904.
Well, welcome back to This Week in the 904. Joining us today is Councilmember at Large Ron Salem. We were just talking about the La Villa UF campus deal, but when you were president of the council, you tasked a committee with figuring out what to do about downtown. What was it about kind of that conundrum that was like, we've got to figure this out?
Well, part of it was the Laura Street Trio was a big part of that. That committee is chaired by Kevin Carrico, who is the vice president now and probably likely to be the next president of the council. Laura Street was a big part of it, and just the lack of development in downtown, what we could do as a council to speed up that process. And I think Councilmember Carrico is going to be calling a meeting fairly soon, because a big part of that was the future of the leader of the DIA and the responsibilities of the DIA, because Ms. Boyer is supposed to be leaving sometime over the summer.
And she was extended briefly, right? Am I remembering that correctly? And so, do you know, I mean, what kind of the status is of that?
I believe they are recruiting for a replacement. I hope they're aggressively looking at that, and I think Ms. Boyer may stay over a month or 2 to help train that new person if it is somebody from out of town that might need some assistance.
It would be interesting to have someone who's not Jacksonville in that seat.
I think there are advantages both ways. Andre Wallace held that position before, local person. He's over at the chamber now. So there are different ways of doing it. As long as you've got the right person, I think that's the key part.
What is it about DIA that you thought, let's take a strong look at this? Because one of the other things is whether we give them more power or not.
That is correct. The whole incentive part and completion grants, outright grants, there was a lot of discussion about whether we gave DIA a budget of dollars as incentives, and you use those dollars as you see fit, but after you use them, you're done, versus coming back to the city repeatedly during the year for completion grants, rev grants, that kind of thing.
One of the other things talking about downtown, which is a real issue that they've faced down there, is homelessness.
Right.
And there are some moves being made, I mean, state level, local level. What is your take on the situation there and how we're dealing with that?
This is a very positive discussion, I think. The council, the mayor proposed $10 million in her past budget for homelessness. The council rejected $9 million of that and took $1 million. President White had this proposal of using the JFRD, our fire department personnel, to coordinate the enforcement of this state law that says you can't camp on public property. And working with JSO, they have done just a fantastic job of getting people off the streets. Just to give you an example, we have a program called Homeward Bound, where we will pay the bus ticket to send someone back to their hometown. We are finding that over 90% of the people that are homeless in our area are from out of town. They're not Jacksonvillians, they're from out of, and there's some suggestion that other cities send them to Jacksonville. So we have sent 150 people back to their hometowns over the last 90 days or so.
Over the last 90 days?
Right.
It's interesting, and just so people know, because I actually did a JSO ride along with a different unit where this happened and this woman decided to opt into the Homeward Bound program. It's not like we're busing someone against their will. It's very much like we're helping you get back to where you want to be.
That's the first option we raised to them. Once the JFRD team approaches them, they are homeless, they're on public property. Where are you from? Why are you here? Would you like to get back to your hometown? And if they say yes to those questions, they're immediately moved towards that program. And if you walk through downtown now versus 2 or 3 months ago, it is a world of difference. And that team is now getting out to other pockets of homelessness on public property, Beach Boulevard, where they are beginning to show a real impact out there. This program, with a limited amount of money, has just done a terrific job, and I commend Sheriff Waters, Chief Powers, and what they have done with their personnel to really make a difference in this program.
And how does that compare to what the Deegan administration wanted to do?
Well, they wanted to, as I understand it, almost provide housing to all these homeless people, and that would be a perpetual expense. The way it's being handled now, the way that we're doing it, we're moving many of these people out back to their hometowns. And there was a count done by changing homelessness on January 30th, which is done every year, where they go out all over the county and count the homelessness. The number this year, we know, is less than last year. We don't have the final numbers yet. It was around 500 last year unhoused, and we know it's below that. So we are clearly making a difference. And I think the council is of the thought, if you're from Jacksonville and you're homeless, we want to help you. But if you're from Atlanta or Savannah or Daytona Beach, I think it's better off those cities help those people. And if they want to go back, we're gonna send them back.
So is that the plan, to continue that? I mean, this isn't like an overnight fix, but
aggressively. That's the first thing they do when they approach somebody is, where are you from, and do you want to go back to your hometown?
But from a council perspective, is this what council's going to do to pursue homelessness, or to continue to fix the problem?
Well, we have contracted with Trinity Rescue. There's an additional roughly 60 beds there. We're trying to get a couple of other providers to bring on some beds that we would pay for to place people. And we're looking potentially at a daycare type program where once they go out in the day, we could bring them back and provide services to them, Social Security, whatever it may be. But I think all of that can be done with less than $1 million a year.
Interesting. All right, well, we still have more to talk. We haven't even talked trash yet, literally and figuratively. So be sure to stick around. We're going to get into the Meridian Waste contract and some of the things that have happened with the Office of General Counsel. So we'll see you back in just a second.
From CBS 47 and Fox 30, you're watching This Week in the 904.
Welcome back to This Week in the 904. I'm your host, Emily Turner. Joining us today is Ron Salem, council member at large. And we're here to talk trash, figuratively, or actually, no, quite literally, because that's the contract that is really been this back and forth of political football, if you will, between council and the mayor's office. So we talked a little bit about it last week with former Mayor Lenny Curry, but when it comes to this Meridian Waste contract, they're now suing the city, right?
Well, as I think it's March 3rd, they've given the mayor until early March to sign this contract, or else they're threatening to sue the city. That is correct.
And what was it? So Meridian, who's one of 3 providers to the city for waste pickup, came to you guys asking for more money. Why did council agree?
They went through, at the midpoint of their 6-year contract, this program called a rate review, which is unique to Jacksonville. We're like the only county, city, anywhere that goes through this rate review. The rate review came back with a rate of around $18.50 or so. The council was very concerned with another provider making $24 a household, that they would not be able to be competitive in keeping their staff. So the council went with a rate of $22.50 roughly, not all the way to what the other provider had, but pretty close. We passed that.
What was the vote on that? Do you remember?
I think it was 17-2.
Yeah.
On that. The mayor vetoed it, which is her perfectly right to do that. We overrode that veto 14-10. And now the general counsel has said that we can't alter this contract, that it needs to go back to the $18.50 range with a 5% increase.
But this isn't the first rate review you guys have done. Like my welcome home, welcome back to Jacksonville first series was Return to Recycle, where I broke the news that Meridian, who was the newest contract, because they're not all renewed on the same timeline, they're like on this rolling thing. Meridian made a lot more than Waste Management, and Waste Management's people were leaving to go to Meridian. We saw it happen and play out. And that had to go before, and then the other 2 haulers had a rate review in like February of a couple of years ago, and council voted on that, right?
Right.
And it wasn't, and that was well within your purview.
Well, the other component of this, when we voted initially on December 10th on this contract, there had been discussion amongst the mayor and the general counsel of this separation of power issue, that we can't alter these contracts. We were not provided that information, so essentially we voted at that point when there was an issue raised and a potential lawsuit now we're facing. We didn't have all the information I think we should have had when we voted in December. Obviously, the council felt very strongly about their position and overrode the mayor's veto, and under normal circumstances that would be the end of it. But now we have this opinion of Mr. Fackler's, and there are 41 other instances in the ordinance code where we approve a contract. So this potentially has the ability to just disrupt the whole way the council and the mayor work together.
Because I mean, it works very much in the like fruit of the poison tree. Like if this one contract, you don't have the right to do that. Well, in this same situation, 41 instances, right? Then what does that look like? What are those, for folks who maybe didn't see our story that we did, what are those 41 other places?
There are all sorts of places. The one big one that we altered considerably was the ASM contract. They are the entity that manages the sports facilities. I was finance chair when that contract, and we did all sorts of changes to that contract, passed it by the council. So the council traditionally for the last 40 or 50 years has changed contracts, renegotiated parts of them, and then they go to the mayor for approval. Her right, the mayor's right, is to reject those, veto it. We had the first veto on the Meridian contract that we've had in many years by the mayor. But that's her right to do that. But once we overrode it, we thought the process had ended. But obviously it hasn't. And the concern that I have and others Meridian's going to hire outside counsel and sue the city. And whether the general counsel's office handles this on their own or hires outside counsel, a lot of legal fees that the city will be responsible for. There may be damages incurred, back pay. So there's a lot here that the city is on the line for.
Well, and outside of just Meridian, with these other contracts, if this opinion by Mr. Fackler, who is in the Office of General Counsel, if this holds and is in fact applicable to these other areas, does that essentially curb the power of the purse for the legislative branch?
Absolutely. And that's the concern. The balance of power is altered in the city. And as I said, we're not asking for anything that the council has not done for 50 years since consolidation. It's this recent change that's got many of us upset, which caused me to have a vote of confidence on the general counsel. I introduced a resolution of no confidence. That will be coming up in early March.
Mr. Fackler.
For Mr. Fackler. It's just a way for the council to express their unhappiness with him. There is a way to remove him, but that takes 15 votes, and there's a procedural things that need to occur. I picked this way to send him hopefully a message that many of us are unhappy with what's going on.
How do you feel like, because the Bar Association came out in favor, supporting Mr. Fackler against this resolution. It almost is playing out like a proxy war or a power struggle.
Well, I was discouraged by the Jacksonville Bar. No one called me to understand all the issues. They just came out the next day and said, we support Michael Fackler. I would have loved to have had some dialogue with them to explain why we feel this way, the precedent over the last 40 or 50 years that this opinion upsets, and the potential ramifications for it going down the road. It's very, very serious and potentially brings the government to a crisis.
Well, is there any other lasting thoughts before we send everybody on their way on Sunday morning?
Well, we'll see what happens. The mayor still has the potential to sign this thing by, I think, March 3rd is the date, and I hope she does, so we can get Meridian the money that I think they need to effectively pick up trash. Trash pickup beyond police and fire is the most critical issue we fund. It has to be done well. I've experienced that during COVID, where we weren't picking up trash very well, and it was chaotic. So we've got to make sure that's done effectively.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you for having me, Emily.
And thank you guys for joining us again on this Sunday morning. Of course, we have much more to talk about, which we'll see you here again. And we have plenty of guests joining us. In fact, Mayor Donna Deegan will be joining us soon in the next couple of weeks, so be sure to tune in for that. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thanks for watching This Week in the 904.